Thematic investing is gaining traction in today's investing landscape. But what exactly is thematic investing? And how can investors take advantage of this new trend? Unlike traditional investment strategies that may focus on sectors or regions, thematic investing looks at broader, transformative forces, such as technological advancements, demographic shifts, and environmental changes.
It is really a creative way of thinking about investment. You can divide the stocks through country lens, through industry or sector lens. And theme is a way to think about how to look at the world a bit differently.
Welcome to The Bid, where we break down what's happening in the markets and explore the forces changing the economy and finance. I'm Oscar Polito. Here to help me understand this investing trend is Jeff Shen, co-head of Systematic Active Equity at BlackRock. He'll help us understand the current themes driving investment opportunities, how his team identifies and evaluates emerging themes, and the role of technology in shaping the future of investing. We'll also discuss the risks associated with thematic investing and key takeaways for investors looking to capitalize on these trends. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on The Bid.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Oscar.
And welcome back. We had you on The Bid back in 2023, and you gave us this fantastic history of AI, artificial intelligence.
The artificial intelligence field as we know it today probably can date back a bit around 1940s. And about 80 plus years of research and development. A big part of it is actually how do we think about reasoning in a machine intelligence way. An intelligent agent would get a bunch of inputs, and then the agent would go through a rational set of calculation, what we call algorithm. And the output will be a set of rational actions and behaviors that is actually desirable in a particular type of environment or context. The development here is about better sensing, better processing or better algorithm, and then eventually leading to better output.
We learned a lot about how it's evolved over many decades. Not surprisingly, AI has continued to be a topic that we've covered on the podcast from many different lenses. One of the lenses in which we've covered it is how it is an investable theme that investors can take advantage of. And we want to talk about thematic investing. What does that term mean to you? And how does that differ from traditional investment strategies?
That's a very good question. I would say that when I think about theme investment, it is really interesting in the sense that it's a creative way of thinking about investment, where all of us are very much familiar with 5,000 global investment universe in the global equity market. You can divide the stocks through country lens, through industry or sector lens. And theme is a way to think about how to look at the world a bit differently. You talk about artificial intelligence. Now, there's a supply chain aspect of the artificial intelligence, power supply, chips, and computing stack. Then there's also the demand side of the AI food chain, if you will. Really think about how the enterprises and also consumers are going to be using AI. So when you think about this AI theme, you realize that it doesn't really fit into the country or sector or industry definition very neatly, and it kind of cut across that. So that makes it interesting, a very creative way of thinking about investment. And another aspect that makes theme investment also interesting, exciting, but also potentially difficult is that there's also aspect of timing. A theme can come in and out of favor. There could be an emerging theme that nobody's thinking about, but it becomes much more dominant. There could be a theme that's being overpopulated and overhyped, and therefore there should be quite a bit of caution. So I think there's a bit of a life cycle of a theme that makes also theme investment quite different from the traditional investment. So I'll say identifying the theme and also timing the theme could potentially be both challenges, but also opportunities.
And what you're describing is very similar to when we've spoken to Jay Jacobs about this topic, where he talks about there are multiple ways in which to invest in a theme. There are second order effects across sectors and industries, and there's a lot that has to be taken into consideration. And you can be a bit more dynamic when you're investing through a thematic lens than maybe a strict sector or industry lens. Jeff, when you look at the macroeconomic landscape and the markets, whether it's today or recent past, can you share some examples of current themes that help bring thematic investing to life?
Absolutely. We were talking about artificial intelligence. This is certainly the long-term secular theme that has a life cycle of its own. There are also a lot of cross-sectional thematic implications. There are going to be businesses that are actually AI-proof, if you will, and there are going to be businesses that are actually going to be deeply impacted by the development of generative AI. There's going to be a bit of a long-short aspect of it. That certainly is a big area of focus. When you think about the development of GLP-1 drug, the weight loss drug that's actually quite popular both in the US and also around the globe, there are certainly implications for fast food producers. There's also implications for snack producers. By taking some of these drugs, maybe the appetite for fast or unhealthy snack will go down. So that could have a short-term and also long-term implications. And clearly, given some of the news that's been coming up in terms of President Trump's new policy and executive orders, there are also many interesting themes that actually come out of that. Deregulation, immigration, geopolitics, and also in particular tariffs. So I would say that theme investment is certainly all-encompassing, and I think there are many interesting themes as we speak right now.
It sounds like identifying themes is a full-time job. And Jeff, you're part of a systematic team of analysts and investors. How do you go about evaluating themes? And maybe you can also start with a brief reminder of what does it mean to be a systematic investor?
Yeah, systematic investment has been around for a long time, and our team has also been around for about 40 years. I've only been with the team for 20 years. But I think the way to think about systematic investment is that we use a lot of data, a lot of algorithm and technology to eventually invest in equity or fixed income across many different asset classes. Humans are very much in the process, but machine plays a pretty significant role. And when you think about artificial intelligence or machine learning, these are certainly the latest techniques to help us to make this systematic investment decision. Now, come back to your earlier part of the question in terms of theme identification. I think this is also the place where it's quite interesting. I think there's certainly the creative part in terms of human input. What are the interesting themes or what are the interesting topics people talk about? Now, I like to say that we like to hire PhDs who don't like to read. So there is a bit of a sense of using machine to read a lot of these texts, whether it's broker reports, conference call transcripts, financial news, anything that could be helpful for us to think about a theme idea. And the large language model clearly today is extraordinarily powerful, but we have a long history of using natural language processing to help our decision making. So identifying theme today is certainly prompting the large language model to help us to think about how we can come up with additional insights and additional basket. And the benefit of using the machine to do some of this work is that you get a lot more themes. I understand there are many mega themes out there, but at the same time, there are also some micro theme today that could become a mega theme in 6 months, in 12 months. So I'll say that theme investment powered by technology is really a game of diversification, and it's a game of identifying many, many topics and many, many themes.
Right. It sounds like themes could have, in some cases, a longer term time horizon of investability. But when you said micro themes, that could also mean that it's a shorter term theme, but one still worth identifying and investing in. And Jeff, you talked about technology, but I'd like to ask you a bit more about that because we've talked about things like Gen AI and large language models, and there's just so much innovation in this space. And talk more about the role that technology plays in thematic investing. And again, that mix of man and machine that you alluded to.
I would say that technology for us is certainly central in terms of advancing the potential ability to deliver alpha or outperformance for our clients. And from that perspective, I talk a little bit about how large language model and AI can help us identify the theme. At the same time, timing the theme is also very important. Oscar, you were just talking about, some of the theme may be transitory, some of them may be long-term. And to think about the timing aspect of it, the machine and technology can help us also quite a bit in terms of, positioning. Is this particular position or particular theme becoming very crowded? When you think about all the flows, hedge fund, mutual fund, ETF flows out there, that can potentially impact the ebbs and flows in terms of positioning of a particular theme. They're also interesting to think about market attention on a particular theme. a lot of people talking about it? Is this headline grabbing versus not too many people talking about it? Social media, alongside with financial news, give us a pretty good read on the sentiment of the market. So these are the tools that we're using not only to identify the theme, but also can time the theme. Now, last but not least, is also to think about once you have a theme view, you think it's a good time to invest in a particular theme. Now, how do you implement that particular theme view? Now, implementation is slightly boring, I'll say. At the same time, extraordinarily important. That can make the difference between winning versus losing. So we take the implementation part, identifying the basket, really to think deeply about one single stock could potentially be exposed to multiple themes. And how do you think about this kind of a multivariate analysis is actually all quite important. Risk modeling comes into place, transaction costs come into place. So the implementation, even though it's not the most exciting topic in theme investment per se, but in our mind is extraordinarily important.
It's clear to me, just thinking back over the history of markets, we've talked about markets through the lens of asset classes, stocks and bonds, and sectors like energy or technology. But this lens of investing through themes has become more prevalent in recent periods. And it sounds like there's a lot of innovation going on in this space that you and your team are part of. Jeff, notwithstanding all the exciting things that you've talked about, the opportunities in thematic investing and how you can leverage technology, what are some of the risks that investors should also be aware of when we're talking about thematic investing?
There's definitely opportunities. There are also plenty of challenges. I talked about timing the theme to be quite difficult. I think theme tends to be a bit trend following, if you will. There is something that maybe a few people, thought leaders are starting to talk about it, and then there'll be more followers. Maybe 10 years ago, not too many people are talking about AI. Fast forward today, everybody's talking about AI. So I think there is certainly this kind of a trend following aspect of it. And I think one of the things that we really need to watch out for is what I call a late momentum trade. So everybody's already on it, and you get on to the last person on the bus, and the bus is going to veer off the course. You better watch out. So I think that's one key risk and challenge. The second part is a lot of investors are also thinking about where do I take money from if I were to invest in theme? How do I benchmark this? If I'm investing in a global equity market universe or a US equity market universe, do I take it out of MSCI World? Do I take it out of my S&P 500 exposure? And if so, while in itself, the theme investment can be interesting and exciting, but would it really outperform MSCI World or the S&P 500 over short term or long term? So I think benchmarking is also quite important. And the last but not the least, implementation. So implementation is clearly a big challenge. You can have a great idea, but when it comes down to portfolio construction, putting the investment into work, I think there are many, many details that you got to get it right. So that's also another challenge.
Right. So just identifying the theme. What is that and what are the companies to own? Implementing that theme. You mentioned that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. Timing, not only when to get into the theme, but also when to get out and has it run its course. And then you also mentioned sourcing, which is if you're invested in the market and you want to invest in themes, what am I selling in order to invest in the theme? Jeff, what takeaways should investors have for those who are interested in incorporating more thematic investing into their portfolios? What should they be considering and what should they be looking ahead to in terms of trends?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think theme investment is here to stay. I think it's an extraordinarily exciting way of thinking about the world. Yeah, if anything, it's also a creative way of thinking about investment. So I think this is maybe a little bit of my liberal arts roots come through that I think it's quite important to think about this as a creative way of thinking about investment. And so that being said, I think it's also very important to think about how do we identify theme through this kind of a new technology. It turned out to be that I think rather than concentrate on the themes, I think there is a lot of room if you use the right technology to potentially broaden the potential theme investment. So I think there's a potential for diversification for theme investment. And the second part of theme investment I think is quite important is that knowing there is a bit of a trending aspect of theme investment, knowing there's a danger of late momentum trade, I think it's very important to time these trades very carefully. A particular economic theme can be very much right over the long run, but at the same time, the timing of it is quite important. And the last but not the least is that implementing it with a sense of perfection, if you will. This is not a place to be loose. This is a place that you want to be very tight in implementation. And I think if you get some of these things right, I think you're going to have the creative part, but also get the potential strong investment results from this type of way of investment.
We've definitely talked about this is a new market regime. You need to be more dynamic and you need to be a little bit more granular in how you approach the market. So it sounds like thematic investing helps you do that. Jeff, one of the themes of having you on the podcast is we learn a lot. We've learned a lot about AI and we've learned a lot about how to look to the market through a different lens. So thank you for educating us on that. And thank you for doing it here on The Bid.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bid. Subscribe to The Bid wherever you get your podcasts.
This content is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or a solicitation. Reliance upon information in this material is at the sole discretion of the listener. In the UK and non-European Economic Area countries, this is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. In the European Economic Area, this is authorised and regulated by the Netherlands Authority for the Financial Markets. For full disclosures, go to blackrock.com/corporate/compliance/bid-disclosures.